So 20 years ago, Keiko was brought back to the ocean and rehabilitated. What kind of a whale was he?
Well, you know, it's always interesting to talk about what kind of or a whale he is or how we describe a whale, because we have only human terms to describe a whale. And I don't know that they're sufficient terms because, you know, we can't ask them. And it would be, you know, as we talk about whale families and whether they get broken up when they're captured and the like, wouldn't it be wonderful if we were able to ask them what they think? Because we certainly know from science and the work that's been done on the whale brain that they have a very complex brain, particularly in the areas of communication and of emotion. And more complex in terms of the way the brain looks on a sonogram and on an MRI than our brains. So we don't really know a lot, but often what I've said is that, you know, we as humans have a record of attacking one another, of doing really horrible things to our own species. And you look at the animal kingdom, and but particularly you look at orca, and that's not true. So in some ways we ask ourselves, well, who is the more advanced species? And I always say, well, I don't know. I'm not sure which one it may be the more advanced species. But with respect to Keiko, one has to look at his history. He was a movie star whale. That's how this began. It wasn't that he was the best orca in captivity, the best candidate for rehabilitation and reintroduction to the wild. He was a movie star. And tens of thousands of children, when they heard that he was still in Mexico City, in a small tank, shallower than he is long, and that he was suffering from a papillomavirus, a rash on his pecs, they wrote letters and they wrote cards and thousands of cards to Warner Brothers, which produced the film, and then later to the Humane Society that got involved. And it was the children who created this opportunity for this one whale. So that's part of the background of who he was as an animal. But I think as I got to spend time with him, which was later, when we moved him first from Reno Aventura in Mexico City, the small tank there, to a specially built facility for him at the Newport Aquarium, the Oregon Coast Aquarium in Newport, Oregon. Much larger, much deeper, natural seawater, cold water, and he gained 2,000 pounds in weight. He got 7 inches longer. His papillomavirus disappeared. And then a team of veterinarians evaluated him and determined that, yes, he was healthy enough to return to the waters where he had been captured more than 20 years before in Iceland, which was why that site was selected. So when I talked to the trainers, the animal care staff, about Keiko, they would always say how special he was. He had friends, he had different people he preferred over others. He would certainly approach the ones that were his closest human buddies directly and was very calm. He was full of life. And being able to see the transition from Mexico to Oregon, where he gained weight and strength, and then go to Iceland, where you can see in the pictures behind me, they're little tiny, but those are Keiko. And I'm out on a boat and Keiko's coming on my shoulder on an open ocean walk. And he's out of the water, breathing heavily, blowing. And you see the vibrancy and the strength that he acquired through the open ocean walks. Like training for us to go on a marathon, that's what he did. And he was full of life and vigor, and you could see that and feel it in the way he acted. So was he a happy whale? I don't know. I don't know what happy means for a whale. Was he healthy? Was he robust? Was he exhibiting behaviors of a whale in the wild? Absolutely.
Can you tell us how you organized his rehabilitation, his transfer to Iceland? How did it happen?
Sure. Well, it happened with a lot of people from different disciplines, all coming together for the same goal, which is to bring him home to his waters and hopefully find a pod that he would accept and who would accept him. And that's why we always talk about this as reintroduction and not release. Because simply to open a gate, release a whale, an orca, who to survive lives with a family, just releasing would be inhumane. It would not be appropriate. What you want to do is create an environment and create the circumstances where he can join other whales and live with them permanently. So that was the goal, reintroduction to the wild. The first steps were, as I mentioned, getting him healthy in Oregon in a much deeper tank, lots of exercises, toys of varying types in the pool with him so that he would get strength from working with certain of those toys, introducing live fish in the Oregon tank. He didn't know what a live fish was. So he'd go and with the right command, he'd go pick it up, he'd bring it back, open his mouth and give it back. That's what he had been trained to do. No idea that it was food. But after a while, he'd take one and swallow it. Well, not so bad. And he'd do that more. Now, in Oregon, we couldn't possibly have enough fish so that live fish was his diet. So he was still fed thawed frozen fish, capelin or herring. Lots of exercise, good nutrition, and lots of care. When he was healthy enough, then the decision was made to transport him to Iceland. Well, how do you transport a whale? Well, marine parks have been transporting whales for a long time. You fly them. And the airport in Oregon was a small town airport, and we were going to an island off the south coast of Iceland, an equally small airport. So we worked with the US Air Force, and they leased a C-17, at the time the largest US transport plane that existed. They leased it to the Free Willy Keiko Foundation. And that was the first time that the US Air Force had ever leased a plane to a private group. And they did it because it was deemed to be in the best interests of the United States to transport the whale. So we transported the whale, a lot of us in this great, huge cargo plane, in a very large, for lack of a better term, a fiberglass bathtub, filled with cold, fresh water, not salt water, because they won't allow putting salt water in an airplane, because if it leaks around, it corrodes things. So he had to be in fresh water. And you had to keep him cool by spraying him with cold water the whole flight. And you covered his body in what we in the States call A&D ointment. It's baby ointment. So you cover his whole body in that so he's kept moist. And so his skin doesn't dry out. And this tank was chained in. And then we had to air-to-air refuel twice en route, because we had to take off with only enough fuel to take off, because it was a short runway, so it had to be light. As soon as we got up in the air, Air Force jets came over and they air-to-air refueled, and we were free to walk around and see this, go up in the cockpit. Wow. And then before we left US airspace on the east coast of the US, we took on another air-to-air refueling to take on only enough fuel so we would still be light when we landed in Vestmannaeyjar, Iceland. So there were all kinds of logistics, is what I'm pointing out, in the transport. So you need experts who know how to do this, who've done it before, and who are all prepared for every issue that could arise. And so we were there. Got him to Iceland. UPS, the United Parcel Service, had a truck. They signed for it for purposes of fun. And then we transported him to the bay where we had constructed a very large sea pen, which is a pen that is netted on the sides. And it's about 25 feet deep, so about 8-9 meters deep of water, and it has a netted bottom. So it's not open to the sea in that way, but it's a large protected area. We even had in the center of it a platform that could be raised and lowered. So if he needed specific medical attention, it could be raised and he would be in 2 or 3 feet of water, a meter or two. And his caregivers could be standing there to work with him. Mm-hmm. So it was a very specially designed area. It had a little building on it for protection because the weather in Iceland can be quite severe. And so initially we did lots of exercises with him in that bay pen, about the size of a French football field, twice that size. So it's a big tank, but a big netted area. And then we also netted off the whole bay for probably, 5 hectares or so of netted area. And then we cut a gate in the bay pen, taught him to go through the gate, and then he had the whole bay to work with. And we would then take out little boats, take him on exercising around the area. And in that first few weeks we were in Iceland, we had a terrible storm, and it destroyed a lot of the infrastructure. It broke apart the net. It destroyed the medical lift in the middle, which we never were able to repair. Mm-hmm. We often had over 100 knots of wind in this bay. And there are pictures of me holding someone from blowing off with ice and the like, and it's a summer day, it's June. So it's crazy. And the weather was our biggest challenge in many ways. Mm-hmm. But all of it was designed as how to make him stronger, more independent, be able to capture live fish and know that they were his diet. So what our training staff did, and it wasn't me, it was the caregivers, the people who really worked directly with the whale. I had the privilege of managing the team and managing the work, but these are the experts. These are the people who really knew what to do and did it. And so we would take him and taught him to follow a boat. And we'd start at 2 knots and then 3 knots and 4 knots and go out for 20, 30-mile swims to get him strong so that he would be strong enough when he met a family of whales, a pod, to travel with them 100 or more miles a day. And he would be able to keep up and be as naturally strong and vibrant as they are. So that was a whole training program. And then we would try to find wild whales. And if we saw, or we had 3 boats, we'd send a boat out and they'd radio back, okay, there are orca here. And we'd then take Keiko and do a swim to where they were. But to go 10 miles or more away, by the time we got there, sometimes they'd be gone. So we had a major benefactor who came over and realized how difficult it was to find the wild whales to create the opportunity for interaction. And he donated a helicopter. And with that helicopter, we could always be up looking for whales and be able to coordinate our work with Keiko to where the wild whales were. It changed everything. But we had the summer months each year from May to late August when the wild whales were in the area. The rest of the year, they're gone. So that was the field season, if you will, for our work and our research. We would take him out, look for wild whales whenever they were there. And this went on for 4 years. And what I can say is in August of each year, we would say, well, how are we doing? Is this working or not? He's strong, he's robust, he loves the wild open ocean. He's okay in the Bay Area when we bring him back, but he's doing fine. But he hasn't yet connected with wild whales. But what we saw every summer was that at the beginning of the summer, the first year, he was timid. He'd approach whales, but I don't know what they are, and they'd stay away. By the August, he would be swimming up to their tails, swimming around near them, and then come back toward us. And our protocol was that if he was near whales, we turn off the engine, because he knew the sound of our engine so well that it was like a whistle. He could be a mile away with whales swimming around. We turn on the engine, well, my buddies, they come back. So we would just drift away and pay no attention. And we consciously wouldn't look at him. We try to do everything we could so that we were not engaged with him if he had the opportunity to be with whales. So by the end of the first summer that we were out doing that, he was beginning to interact a little bit. The next May, he picked up exactly where he'd been in August. No loss of interest, no loss of familiarity, no loss of comfort with the environment in the winter months. So it's that progression, if you will, that led me and the team to believe we keep doing this each year, as long as he's progressing. So that started in 1998. We got him out the first year in 1999. In 2001, he was interacting quite a bit with wild whales. And in 2002, we took him out. We were a little late getting out and getting the satellite tag on and everything. It was July. And first days out, he joined a big super pod of whales that were feeding on a large herring ball around the islands. And he stayed with them without coming back to us at all. Wasn't directly with them. We had a sailboat out with no engine that could photograph and video. And he was maybe 25 yards, 25 meters away from the whales at times, other times kind of right near them, not directly integrated in the same way, but certainly hanging out with them, if you will. And that was tremendously inspiring. So that was the process that we went through to try to reintroduce him to a pod.
Okay. And then he left to Norway.
He's with wild whales. We're not going out to look for him. We're trying to keep an eye on it. We have a radio tag on him and a satellite tag. So with the radio tag, we could hear where he was, pretty much in the area right around the island. With the satellite tag, this is more than 20 years ago, we would get a signal every morning at 8 o'clock as to where he was. But that was the only signal we would get from the satellite. So we knew where he was. And then a storm came up in August, and I pulled the boats in because it was a pretty severe storm. And we lost track of him over the weekend. On Monday morning, we could hear where he was. And with the satellite, we realized he was we were away from the island and on the south, and beginning to travel what I would say would be to the east. So we took a boat out, I took a small plane out. I could hear him on the radio, but I could never see him in the waves. And a plane, unlike a helicopter, we didn't have our helicopter anymore at that point, is going too fast. Even as slow as you can go with a plane, and it's got to be a 2-engine plane to be out over the ocean legally. And so it's going just too fast to see much. So really difficult, and we didn't see him. And we sent people out, we never really saw him, but every morning we could see he was going east toward Norway. So we went to the Faroe Islands, figuring, okay, we'll get partway there and see what we can do. And we got a helicopter, rented a helicopter from the Navy there, and they took us out. And we could again hear him on the radio, on the VHF tag, but we couldn't see him, and he's still going east. So it took him. He was almost 3.5 weeks on his own in Iceland, and then he swam 1,000 miles to Norway on his own. So that was another 4 weeks. From the satellite tag, we know he was diving deep, deeper than he had ever dove with us, down to like 300 feet. So why would he do that? I assume maybe he was with whales and that he was diving for food when they did. But of course, that's supposition. We don't know. We know he was diving. We know that when he got to Norway, and by that time the word was out, Keiko, the famous whale, is coming. A fishing boat, a family fishing boat with children on board, saw him. They threw him some fish. He was not with wild whales at that point, and he followed them home, up a fjord to them. And we sent some of his animal care staff, his staff there to meet him. He was healthy. He hadn't, we did girth measurements. He hadn't lost any size over the 7 weeks. So many of us assume he was eating. Do we know that? No. I mean, what do we actually know and what do we assume? Different things based on his health. He was in great shape. So, but there were no wild whales in the fjord. So we sent people there to care for him, provide him with food. There was little food in the fjord for him. And they cared for him over the next couple of years. And he was free to come and go. He had no nets, but he came back every day for food and he was in the area and they cared for him. And then in the winter of 2003, he caught some kind of a virus and he quickly passed away. By the time they realized, because again, he wasn't enclosed in any way, he was out away. By the time they realized how the distress he was in, he had begun to shut down. At the time, he was the oldest male whale in captivity. He is today still the only orca that has ever had the opportunity from captivity to live in the open ocean in the way he did. So people always ask, well, success or failure? And it depends how you look at it. In my mind, it was a success in that he had the highest quality of life for those years of any captive whale ever. From every way we can observe quality of life. But were we successful in helping him connect to a pod and swim off and live with them? That piece of reintroduction, we couldn't help him create. So that gives us the dilemma we all face today. We know how captivity stresses these animals, how they live shorter lives, and how they suffer. We have to do better. And that's why creating sanctuaries for whales, just the way we've created them around the world for elephants, for the great work you've done with all kinds of animals, now is the time to do that for whales, so that we can give them high quality life in a natural environment and give them as close to their natural habitat as we can do, knowing that except in very rare cases, will it be possible to actually reintroduce them to the wild.
For us, in our view, it was a success because Keiko was offered several years of real life, of
That's
real
right.
orca life.
Exactly.
And so important. How old was he when he died, approximately?
About 27, 28.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's old for the captivity industry.
For the captive rate, yeah. For the wild, not so much. You know, for the wild whales, they live in males into their 50s and 60s, and females into their 60s to 80s even. Mm. But for a captive whale, especially at that time, it was a long life. And all of us who I think were with him felt the quality of life he got to experience. He was a completely different animal in Iceland than he had been in Mexico City. completely different. Personality, vibrancy, everything. You could see how he had become so healthy and so vibrant. And you could feel that when you were with him.
I was going to ask you the question of the criticism the industry usually uses. They use the Keiko example, saying, well, it was a failure. I think they don't know the story, or they don't want to know what exactly happened, because you just explained to us. So what would you say to us, to the French who would like to rehabilitate the 4 orques that are in Maryland? We are working together to prepare that opportunity for them. What would you say to our opponents who are saying it's too dangerous, it's not going to work? What would you tell them today?
Well, I think they need only look at all of the success with so many animals, elephants, big cats, chimpanzees, gorillas that have been moved into sanctuary areas, and the fact that they live healthy lives. And they often don't speak to the science, and the science shows how whales suffer in tanks. They are acoustic animals. A tank reverberates their sounds back at them, and they don't use their sounds very often. In nature, they're able to echolocate, and it's their natural acoustic environment in a sanctuary. So can we give them quality of life? We've proven that we can do that with Keiko. We've seen it with dolphins as well in different parts of the world. So there's no question we can provide quality of life. Is it difficult? Well, sure, it's expensive, but it's less expensive than any one of those parks spends on building a tank. When they build their next tank, oh, we're going to make it a little bigger. First of all, it's nowhere near as big as it has to be for their swimming and their diving. The sanctuary we're building in Nova Scotia is 300 times larger than the largest performance tank anywhere in the world. They can dive deeply, they can swim extensive body lengths, get up to full speed. That's the environment we can provide. And the marine parks say, okay, well, they won't get care. Well, of course they will. They'll get the best veterinarian care the world has to offer. They'll have the best animal care staff one can provide. And at the same time, we can provide authentic education about what whales do in the wild. So let's say we were to partner with a marine park. They provide whales to come to sanctuary, and we have underwater and above water cameras. We beam back to the same amphitheater where they used to do performance, and we show in their park what whale behavior is like in nature. And we provide authentic education rather than teaching kids that we should dominate these animals by teaching them to do tricks, which is not what children even naturally know, but they get to see and believe because we do it. And we don't have the right to treat animals that way. And children understand it from their birth, and we teach it out of them by showing them some of these other things. So we can now do authentic education in a sanctuary, as well as providing high quality of life for the cetaceans.
Well, thank you, Charles. Thank you for answering our question. And we wish you all the success in the world for your Nova Scotia sanctuary, and hope to be working with you for our marine land whales.
I look forward to that. Our team is ready to help in every way we can, and we commend you for all of your work, but certainly for your leadership in this endeavor for a sanctuary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.